I'm alone, but not lonely. Japanese kids colonized the realm of information and media, a tale of sex and crime from a faraway place. By Volker Grossmuck, December 1990. On the 1st of November, TV reported a car accident. A miner had driven his father's car out of the garage and into the neighbor's garden. The boy was 1 year old. The father told the press that the kid had learned to drive in the video game parlor to which he had been taking him every day. We're talking here about a new humankind, Shin Jirui. Nothing more, nothing less. At the very least, it's a new kind of humans, if we chose to read it, Shinjin Rui. Well, if nothing else, they're new and they're one of a kind. Nothing more is certain about the otaku, even their humanness is being doubted. They might very well be from outer space. Their phenomenology varies widely. Some otak hunt for photographs of music industry's synthetic scarlets. Some are frantically into computer games. Many are immersed in comic books most of their waking day, others are plastic model maniacs, and yet others fancy hacking into car telephone conversations. Otak is not considered with a certain subject matter, but rather is a mode of being. There are magazines catering to them, fairs, pornography, videos, and computer networks, and there is the book of otaku. According to the new estimation of the editor Do P, one of the otaku magazines, there is a hardcore of 350,000 of them around, but he says how many light otaku exist, nobody knows. If you ask different people for a definition of the term otaku, you might get contradictory answers. In different phases of its dissemination, it changed in meaning. And people look at it from different angles at any given time. What is the smallest common denominator? Otaku are teens or tweens, mostly boys. They usually wear jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers, which might not sound very characteristic, but in fashion-crazy Japan, it is. They despise physical contact and love media, technical communication, and the realm of reproduction and simulation in general. They are enthusiastic collectors, manipulators of useless artifacts and information. They are in underground, but they are not opposed to the system. They change and manipulate and subvert ready-made products, but at the same time they are the apotheosis of consumerism and an ideal workforce for contemporary Japanese capitalism. They are the children of the media. Take, for example, Kashuda Riko. She is game otaku. Her small room is littered with arcade machines, 230 naked game boards that she can hook onto the consoles. She wears a light blue denim jacket and a skirt, and she looks a bit lost in between the sterile industrial partitioning walls of the reception area of Login magazine. She looks at me with lowering reservation, as if cautious, but speaks with self-confidence and looks into my eyes, therefore she doesn't quite qualify as a hardcore otaku. When she was 8 or 9, she started playing TV home games like ping pong or block. At age 10, she went to the game floors of department stores which offered higher quality graphics than TV games, and started to program her own games in BASIC. In those days, kids would home assemble radios, and it was in amateur radio magazines that special sections for writing games on home computers first appeared. By the age of 13, she had made friends with the manager of the game parlor, to which she now went daily. He introduced her to second-hand video game machine dealers. Their customers up to then had been exclusively managers of game parlors. Then the game otaku discovered them. They sell boards of old used machines, considered garbage before, for upwards of 5,000 and complete consoles and rare items for around 200,000, 300,000. an investment that breaks even in a matter of weeks if the player does not have to feed the coin slot for every game. As turning point in the history of video games, Kashuda identifies Space Invader. Introduced in 1979 by Taito, it was copied sometimes under license, sometimes illegally, by software firms all over the world, and it created a whole generation of game addicts. It was followed by the classics Pac-Man and the all-time number one, according to Kashuda, Pong from Atari, first released in 1971. In the post-Space Invader days, the market exploded. Companies like Namco or Nintendo grew big, some very big. Originally a card game maker, Nintendo, the video game empire, was the top earner of all Japanese companies in 1989 for the 8th consecutive year. They raked in 250 billion yen in sales. Talking about the birth and rise of the phenomenon, Kashuda is taken with sentimentality. In those days she dreamt of games, but she says it was not the games which took over her imagination, but her imagination originally led her to the games. She is an exceptional case in the computer otaku world, where the overwhelming majority is male. For example, 98.3% of the readers of Login, the major game magazine for which she works as an editor, are male. Today, Kashuda is 20 and studies philosophy. No, she does not find that choice of field surprising. The game world includes the real world and vice versa, so there is certainly a relation between philosophy and games, but a very complicated one that she can't quite explain, she says, and laughs. New generations. The Japanese, maybe more so than other peoples, want to find out who they are and where they are going. It is only in the last 15 years that the accumulated wealth can be felt in society. This didn't happen without radical changes and ruptures. Internationally, they are mostly accepted and praised for their technology, a shaky base to build an identity on. Changes in attitudes and mentality are most visible with the young. They wish to understand what they are. The wish to understand what they are up to brings forth the coining of a new generation just about every year. The term otaku has had many predecessors in the debates about contemporary popular culture. An older catchphrase that was used for a season or two is morturayumu ningen, moratorium people. Okanagi Keigo, professor at the neuropsychiatric department of Keio University, coined it in 1997. Moratorium Nigen no Jadai in Kayu Kuran, October 1997, English translation in Japan, Icho, Volume 5, Number 1, 1987. I don't know if I'm actually going to read all these citations necessarily. Originally, Erik Erikson's term psychosocial moratorium referred to a period of training or study in which young people are suspended from fulfilling their obligations and responsibilities to society. In Okanagi's interpretation, it becomes today's dominant social character. The description of this moratorium mentality can be read as a background for the 80s phenomenon of otaku. The affluent consumer society, says Okanaki, has an infantilizing effect. Media and advertising appeal to the child in everyone. As the rate of science and technology-driven social change accelerates, everyone is forced to flexibly adapt and perpetually learn in order to keep up. The frenzied demon's dance of cultural appearances and disappearances allows no other mode of being than a provisional temporary one, permanently on call. No other mode than a playful and leisurely involvement that maintains distance. Everybody has come to be both consumer and non-affiliate, uncommitted visitor within a controlling and projecting structure, within a controlling and protecting structure. Like the otaku, the shallow human relations allow the moratorium people to live isolatedly. The moratorium biographies lead to an identity diffusion syndrome and an ego vacuum that, according to Okanagi, have today become the normal state of affairs. The moratorium becomes an end in itself, but the situation also contains an explosive, destructive power. Most of all, Okanagi blames the mass media, which produce an unreal state of existence. The self-dissociation characteristic of mass media also typifies the psychological structure of young people. They have now become omnipotent through assimilation to the mass media, which have a magical power over society. A tone of cultural pessimism runs through Okanagi's article, even if at the end he tries to comfort us by pointing out first signs of a post-moratorium trend. We get a somber picture of isolated, solipsistic men and women who lose themselves in the postmodern tides that even threaten to engulf the real society from where Okanagi writes, the society of production and distribution. For the Moratorium o Ningen, we pick up the general social tone that sets the mood for the birth of the otaku, a mood characterized by self-dissociation and hyper-reality, with their successors, Shinji Ryu, Riai? I don't know words. We encounter the viciousness and additionally get a more joyful approach to information. Oh, Shenzhen, okay. The Shenzhen Ryui, like otaku, varies widely in meaning. As a non-technical term, it can refer to any kind of generation, but sometimes it gets connected with a specific group of young people for a while, like the yuppies of the late 70s. Those Shenzhen Ryui were college or professional kids in their 20s. Quite different from otaku, they put a strong emphasis and spend a lot of money on a glossy outward appearance. They preferably have jobs in modeling or advertising which earn them enough money and leave them enough time for their main source of pleasure, showing off luxury goods and fast cars. The latest among them is a left arm suntan, because it signals that this girl or boy drives a left-wheel import car. The Shenzhen Ryui were also called Crystal Kids, is how it seems to be spelled. After Yuppie Guide, or after Tanaka Yuso's award-winning bestseller, Non-Tanako Kiristro, Koristaro, English as somehow Crystal, which became a sort of yuppie guide to Tokyo's inn restaurants, boutiques, and clubs, a how-to instruction on being hip. It first appeared in 1980 in the Monthly Journal of the Arts, Bonji, and was immediately republished as a book which sold more than 1 million copies. Tanaka gives us an extensive inside view of the joyful life in empty forms, a life in which one truly and explicitly cherishes snobbery and affectation. His plot verges on non-existence, but in 442 notes, he boasts with all the information the trendy hyper-consumer needs. Example: where do you go on a Saturday night after 11 if the desire for ice cream overcomes you? Answer: take a taxi to Schwen's on Killer Avenue. Because of the rapid change in fashion, most of the information was of course outdated the moment somehow Cristal hit the masses, although other info bits are here to stay. Through the Shenzhen Ryui, for example, the Japanese language was lastingly enriched by the brand name syndrome. The Shenzhen Ryui shares with the otaku the passion for details that take over the place of connecting ideology. He has to be around town and has to read the latest copy of Mary Claire and Popeye and Briotis. How else would he know that Armeni is out and that Pierre is again de rigueur? And how else would he be able to participate in the table talk at Gold's? Shenzhen Ryui are well-informed snobs. Today the people are still around, but the word has dropped out of use, so it is again free to signify the next generation. The terms invented in order to be able to call the people in the postmodern, meditatized world by name, Moratorium Ningen, Shenzhen Ryui, Nagara Zoko, the people who do many things at the same time, me generation, etc., are coined by the professionally concerned neuropsychiatrists, journalists, and writers. They judge the young by their own values of depth, seriousness, history, subject. The grown-ups are disappointed that their kids do not pick up where they left them the dreams they once pursued, disappointed that they simply drop out of the project of modernity. Parents want to understand their children, but those refuse to express themselves. The birth of the Otaku Zoko, Otaku generation, the unprofessional, non-lifestyle kids of the 80s was a somewhat different case. Birth and rise of Otaku. The etymology of the word is not without black holes. Otaku, like Shenzhen Ryui, is derived from the everyday language and, in the original sense, means your home. Then, in the Neo-Confucian pars pro toto, your husband. And more generally, it is used as the professional pronoun you, since a Japanese individual cannot be thought of without his connection to his household. As everybody knows, there are 48 ways to say I in Japanese, and just about as many to say you. Most of the time, I and you are avoided altogether, but if you want to address someone, you would use his name or anata to an equal or superior, kimi to an inferior, in some cases to an equal, omae to an intimate friend or inferior, or otaku. Otaku is a polite way to address someone whose social position towards you do not know yet, and it appears with a higher frequency in the women's language. It keeps distance. Used between equals, it can sound quite ironic or sarcastic, but is mostly meant in the sense of stay away from me. Imagine a teenager addressing another as sir. This is how it used to be. And in the days of old, about 10 years in real time, some people started to use this expression of detachment for colleagues and friends. There is no consensus as to the exact date and place of this historical event. The most recent past seems to be the most uncertain, and it is handed down to us only in the form of rumors. It would take a historian of everyday life to unearth what happened yesterday. Some informants convey that it was in the advertising world. Others say it was in the circles of animation picture collectors. Please show me your otaku collection, in quotations. The most trustworthy rumor has it that it first came up among young people working in TV and video animation companies. From there, it spread to viewers of animes and the closely related worlds of manga, comic books, and computer games. What exactly you have to do and to be in order to qualify as an otaku is a little more difficult to determine. The smallest common denominator that the world itself conveys seems to be distance and detachment. To find something about the usage of a currently fashionable expression, the first thing to do is to consult the basic knowledge of modern times, an annual encyclopedia on all wakes of life, and a cornucopia of insights into the rapidly changing Japanese language. In the 1990 edition, it says under otaku has been used as discriminatory word among manga and animation maniacs. It spread under Nakimori Aiko's 1984 article, Manga Buriko, for an accent on Buriko see below under idols. It indicates the type of person who cannot communicate with others, is highly concerned with details, and has one exclusive and maniac field of interest. Otaku tend to get fat, have long hair, wear t-shirts, and jeans. The word corresponds to nerd, which in the USA is used for computer and SF fanatics. An American friend told me that nerd does not have some similarity to otaku, but is not completely congruent. That nerd does have some similarity to otaku, but is not completely congruent. A nerd was the guy at high school who would repair his glasses with Scotch tape, the scientific type, carrying a collection of pins in his shirt pocket, which had a blue stain because of the pins, because one of the pens would always break, and of course he had no friends. This image comes close to the one Suzuki Kyoichi draws, an ex-journalist for yuppie magazine Popeye, and today an art editor who introduced me to the more hidden corners of the extensive otaku world. Quote, "In the beginning, otaku was used in a very negative sense, and meant someone who doesn't look good, has no girlfriend, who is collecting silly things, and is generally out of the world. As a definition, I would say that an otaku is a person who is into something useless, idol, manga, or whatever otaku means. He does not have anything else. But in that, he really indulges. It's a silly way of spending time from a normal business point of view. They play games with the same seriousness others use for business. They are easily visible because they don't care about the way they dress. They talk different and look to the ground while talking face to face. They are not into physical activities, are chubby or thin, but not fit, never tanned. They don't care for a good meal. They think they can spend their money on more important things. With computers, they get really involved. Computer game programmers live on potato chips that they eat with chopsticks and on coffee milk. They have a different rhythm, are awake for 40 hours and then sleep for 12. Computer otaku are said to be able to make love with a girl on the screen, but I think many want a girlfriend but can't get one." End of quote. Otaku are a social phenomenon in several ways. The media created them, then a name for them, they inhabit the media, and the search for them is a research into media history. The above-mentioned Nakamori, citation 29, or wait, was that citation 29 or is it just 29 years of age? Okay. Stop trying to be epic. Was at that time an editor of Tokyo Otama Karabu, Adult Club, a mini-komi, minor communication magazine. Okay, that was the actual citation symbol. It says number 1. That some call a mysterious culture magazine, others a minor soft porno publication. When he introduced Otaku-zoku, Otaku Generation, in his article and in public discussion with Yamazaki Koichi, there were already myriads of young people out there waiting for an identity boost. They were living in the media already, so it was just natural that they would want to become the object of the media as well. In that sense, they were average Japanese. They have a direct predilection for mirroring themselves in social statistics and in interpretational debates of cultural critics. Maybe it is not really the strive for an identity that make the Who We Are and Why We're Special books so popular, but really the lust to get inscribed into the media. Also, the importance given in Japan to calling things by their right name might have played a role. In any case, the new term spread very rapidly. An anonymous silent mass had its coming out. As rumors have it, the first massive appearance that brought the new generation into public consciousness was the showing of the animation Spaceship Yamamoto. The video company had, as usually, rented a hall for the first couple thousand of people, and over 1 million came, all about the same age. Quote, "Otaku are a byproduct of hyper-capitalism and the hyper-consumer society," says Yamazaki, 36, another historian of everyday life and an authority on otaku. He is a writer, editor, graphic designer, and most of all, a pop critic for the Asahi Shimbun magazines like Asahi, that's how you say it, Asahi Journal, Popeye, Takarajima, and Weekly Bunshun. Today, Today, otaku has taken on an extremely wide meaning. Originally, it was connected with a precise, stereotyped image. It symbolized a human relationship for which the other forms of saying you would be too intimate. Otaku referred to the space between them. They are far from each other, not familiar. He sees the origin of the social phenomenon otaku in the changes in Japanese culture in the 70s. They are the children of media and technology. They grew up as child with daddy always at work and mummy very eager that her son studies hard so that he can enter a good university, so that he can enter a good company. The cliché Japanese success story, and Kitty goes into hiding behind piles of toys, comics, and play machines. Their parents are the 68th generation, very democratic and tolerant. They want to understand their children, but the kids purposely look for things their parents can't understand. In the sense, the parents are themselves immature and childish. In Japan, there probably is no obvious image of what a grown-up is. Everybody is a child. The severe communicational barriers between parents and children led to a series of killings of parents by their sons. It started in 1980, when a boy who would today probably be called an otaku had slain his parents with a metal baseball bat. The Kinzoku bat murderer, as he was known, was followed up by 6 or 5 youngsters in a very short time. And it still sometimes happens today. The early 80s were the days of school violence. The aggression of students was stopped with disciplinary measures and school rules that prescribe even the ways a student is supposed to talk, is supposed to walk and greet. They remind Yamazaki of Orwell's 1984. Otaku are the post-school violence generation. Specifically, they are good and well-behaved students, study hard, and get good grades, but underneath the surface, they are runaways. Otaku is a shelter for them. Informational fetishism and inanimanism. The education system in which the famous industrial warriors are trained is a generally acknowledged background factor for the emergence of the otaku generation. In school, says Yamazaki, children are taught to take in the world as data and information in a fragmentary way, not systematically. The system is designed for cramming them with dates, names, and multiple choice answers for exams. The scraps of information are never combined into a total view of the world. They don't have a knowledge value, but the character of a fetish." End of quote. For this emphasis on facts and memory rather than understanding the Japanese language has again found a fitting catchphrase, manual education. It doesn't prepare you for life, but rather for the ubiquitous quiz shows on TV, where candidates have to produce minute details of the life of Amadeus Mozart, the comic character of Ultraman, or the idol singer of Matsuda Saiko. Without any context, this knowledge remains just a collection of info chips. Information fetishism is a central term for Yamazaki. The otaku continue the same pattern of information acquisition and reproduction they have learned at school. Only the subject matter has changed. Idols, cameras, or rock and roll, but content has become negligible anyway. Otalucky people can be found in every genre. I think they mean otaku people can be found in every genre. It's a mode of being. You find them even in fashion. Rather than dressing in trendy clothes for the pleasure of it, the fashion otaku dresses in information. He shows it off saying, "Do you know this? Oh, you don't? That's all." A rock otaku, for instance, does not listen to the music, but collects data on the recordings, the names of the musicians, producers, engineers, studios, etc. Quote, "The original otaku shows us that we are all information fetishists," end of quote, says Yamazaki. He caricatures the image of the Japanese. I have to drink water. Holy shit. Mm, mm, mm. Our own collection of info bits and pieces seem to have come close to the core of otaku phenomenon. It has to do with the uselessness and information, but the role of media and technology remains ambivalent. Suzuki thinks it a mistake to identify them with media. It would exclude some of the people who in fact are otaku. Why do they keep spelling it like this? Is this like a separate term that I'm just unaware of? Otaki? Otaki. Okay, I think they just mean otaku. Okay. Are otaku would exclude some of the people who in fact are otaku. So we pick up on the basic knowledge of modern terms again, which is itself an expression of the culture of fractured knowledge and info chips. From the entry on Otaku-Zoku, we learn that this generation, quote, can think only in the mode of meism as a result of a way to interpret and deal with the high-tech society. It tends towards an isolated and non-human existence. These tendencies range from necrophilia, pedophilia, and fetishism to the illness of partiality and computer hacking. The phenomenon has cancer-like exploded with the inorganic keyboard society at its center. End of quote. I do find it interesting to read hacking in the same list with necrophilia, but I love the keyboard society. Japan is the most semiotized society. Everything is a sign. Everything is surface and interface. The Japanese lead a magazine lifestyle. Just by looking at people's faces in the street, you can tell which magazines they read. Everything comes in a ready-made package. Otaku are developing the Japanese mentality of hybridizing given information to the extreme, and they become, in fact, a closed-circuit hybrid with their machines. A media sabigo, cyborg or cybernetic organism, we read in the store of wisdom. An imitation of our esteemed basic knowledge is a dependent person, e.g. a couch potato. The media cyborg lives thanks to the media. In the age of cyber medialism, with its emphasis on stimulation, the high-tech media become the condition for survival. The media cyborgs in their electronic womb are also called aliens. The Japanese relation towards technology is indeed something peculiar. Japanese kids are geniuses in operating technology, like the 1-year-old who crashed his father's car. But says Yamazaki, they cannot talk and express their opinions well. They live less at home with other people than with machines, materials, and information. Thus, they tend towards a kind of inanimism. Living beings are thought as inanimate things. Yamazaki tells me about the pet boom, and that dogs and cats are seen as a kind of mechanical toys. When they become boring, they get dumped. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone are big heroes for many otaku. They themselves wouldn't even think about doing bodybuilding and becoming strong. They think of these hunks of muscles as a kind of robot, a very well-designed machine, not any different from comic figures like Gundam. This inanimism is maybe the reverse side of the traditional naming their machines. Of the traditional Shintoist nature inanimism that is still very much alive in the current Japanese culture. Yamazaki gives an example of factory workers naming their machines Monroe, Hanako, or Madonna. Female names are the most popular since it's a real man-machine system. Quote, Japanese people are in a sense fetish people. They don't tell the animate from the inanimate. This fact is an important background of the otaku. The two-dimensional complex is a kind of animism. They tread humans as things and things as humans. End of quote. By perceiving the world via screens and the print Otaku-Kids acquire, what is known as the two-dimensional complex, 2D, is more real. Images plus fantasy equals hyperreality. Mm. Computer otaku and communication patterns. From what we learned about otaku and their relation to information, media, and technology, we should think that they appear in the purest genre of computer otaku. So I go back to Minami Ayama, Office of Login, where I had already talked with game maniac Kashuda Riko. This time, in order to meet Ito Gabin, contributing editor and recent curator and contributor of an art installation at the Tokyo Hyperreal exhibition, since his picture regularly appears in the login Ito, has become the hero of the computer game otaku. When he is recognized in the streets of Tokyo's electronic district Akihabara, he is not accosted directly, but a little later he can read the hot info on some otaku bulletin board. I saw Gabin. Login target group is game fans between Login's target group is game fans between 13 and 18, and it sells 180,000 copies monthly. It carries mostly product information on PC-based games and on related hardware, manga, and animation series, especially the darker ones like Gundam and God Bars. I want to know about the content of otaku computer networks, and Ito lists some of the headings of the electronic boards, games, manga, and Roricon, Lolita Complex, child porno of characters of comp games, see below, music exchange of MIDI data of the copies of soundtrack of the latest arcade games, war, air guns, anything you can imagine. There is one for every branch of otaku, which does not make all of them computer otaku. They use the electronic network simply as media that allow them to stay at home and meet like-minded without any physical contact. But of course, you also have hardcore computer otaku, like the hackers who above had appeared in one row with pedophilia. The meaning of technology, Ito explains, is this: when we found something impossible, we do it. Like the hacker who finds out how to destroy data, so he does it. He doesn't think about the meaning. In the same sense, they spread viruses for fun. When some technomaniac finds a way to hack into the copy protection of DAT recorders, even if he succeeds, the real otaku wouldn't have any music to play. It's just a game. Useless. If they can outwit the protection systems, aren't they pretty smart? Otaku is not exactly synonymous with creative, but a lot of creative people are otaku. Ito thinks they have infinite possibilities. The ultimate promise of technology is to make us master of a world that we commanded by the push of a button. The otaku are the avant-garde exploring this world. They grew up taking media for granted. Now they use them as their natural habitat for instant gratification of desires. Desires, of course, that they only direct at what media can give. The time structure of the otaku world is one of constant disposition. This attitude of consumerism is also applied to other people, which is a possible explanation for the extensive use of the telephone at every hour of the day and night. Mostly otaku avoid face-to-face communication, but excessively exercise communication via technical media. The structures of their exchange information are uwasa, humor, or rumor, and kuchikomi, oral communication, gossip, minor communication, and ufu rekado, off-record, rupture and fictionality, and play, e.g. telephone games and parties, dispersal of the self into the network, and in the last instant, discommunication. It is important to speak not what is spoken. Characteristic of otaku is that they speak without context. They live in the simulacrum of a self-referential system which is not subjected to content. Central is the awareness. There are media. Basically, they can communicate only with the same type otaku. Their exchange is not interactive, they only show off their information. People categorize each other by their predilection for certain details. If two of them find overlapping taste, they get along well. If not, they don't have anything to say to each other. No proselytism drives them to preach their way. Proselytism. No proselytism drives them to preach their way. Nagoya, I've been told, is today the center of otaku. They make up whole neighborhoods and relevant sectors of the population. Nagoya is a non-place, a dead, boring city with nothing happening. Therefore, the only thing to do is to go into the networks. 16,000 alone but not lonely people in one spot. After so much talk about them, we now leave the editorial offices and visit one of the rare occasions where the shy and unsocial otaku meet. Komiketo, comic market, started out as a fair for non-commercial comics and is held twice a year. At the last, on the 18th and 19th of August in Makuhari Misi, 16,000 anime mania and animation maniacs from various countries gathered. They were joined by representatives of all of the other major otaku genres: amateur radio otaku, idol otaku, technical otaku, plastic model otaku, uniform otaku, etc., etc. All of them have their own magazines, which are here littering the long rows of tables. These minikomi keep up the communication in the more and more differentiating and specializing world of otaku. Just about all of them contain manga. The special attractions in Hiromi Misi were Kuso Puri costume plays, where scenes from favorite animation TV series are reenacted, as comic figures in full gear, of course. Manga are a big market. The estimated total circulation of all books in 1988 was... Wait, is this like a billion? Yeah, okay. Was 1 billion 7... Wait, okay, numbers. I apologize. Was 1,758,000,000, 970,000. Some of them are as thick as telephone books. They are omnipresent in subway trains, restaurants, and bookshops. Successful series are remade into book version with again million copy sales, and into TV animation and video games. The one with the highest circulation, Shonen Jump, sells 5 million copies a week. According to Yamazaki, it is the most otaku magazine, containing a lot of violence, mechanics, fantasy, and combination of all three like Gundam and Ultraman. Beneath these commercial manga, in the underground if you will, we find manga drawn by otaku. They are produced in small copy to be circulated and exchanged on Comic or by mail, and more successful ones in manga stores like Takaoka in Kanda or Manga no Mori in Shinjuku. The bookstore Shozen in Kanda is another place where, on Saturday afternoon, masses of otaku in jeans or school uniforms are grimly elbowing their way through the narrow aisles, quietly browsing through comics and idol fan magazines, soft pornos and game music CDs, Dragon Quest and comic plastic figures, telephone cards with manga characters and idols on them, posters and plush animals. Here one finds a small selection of the garage comics on the Kamiketo, with titles like Uncolored, Cupid, Hyperactive, Puff Puff, Blind Logic, or the one with the extended English title, Wing, that's Gretsick. It covers various kinds of comics and novels which make you feel at home. Holy shit, I have to drink water. In most cases, these manga are hybrids or genre mutations of given commercial models. They show an attitude of joyful plagiarism that does not even strive to be the original. The only really original aspect about them is that in contradistinction, okay, is that in contradistinction to the ones you buy in the convenience store. Otaku manga contain uncensored depictions of primary sexual organs. In a country where every single pubic hair intended for publication in film or print has to be covered up or sandpapered out, the fact that these mangas show it at all is almost revolutionary. We can safely assume that a large part of the sex life of otaku is represented by comic figures in manga, animation, and video games. Sex to them is nothing physical, but medial. They don't have lovers, in part because they are afraid of each other, and find 2D satisfaction much safer. In that sense, the guy from Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape can be thought of as the Western male correlate to the post-sexual otaku. Yamazaki offers another explanation. 2D sex is a reaction to the pressure of male chauvinism. Boys refuse to grow up to become the regular mucho. They don't like to be aggressive. True, in the comics there is a lot of violence, SM, slashing, and bondage, but in the real world they could not do it. They're too shy. A major genre in the manga porno are little children, a term that frequently appears in this context as rurikon, an especially cryptic anagram that cannot be solved without our faithful basic knowledge of modern times. Rurikon, Lolita Complex, was named after Vladimir Nabokov's novel. It signifies the strange sexual taste for teenage girls. It is so closely related to the otaku that the encyclopedia names it as a significant characteristic. One also calls the otaku yaoizoko, the generation of fans of young girls. The suspected child murder Miyazaki's victims, we heard about him already, and we will still hear more below, were between age 4 and 7, meaning younger than the teenagers that Rurikon are supposed to like. So it is not a mistake to call him, so is it not a mistake to call him an otaku? On this point, we have to disagree with the basic knowledge. To identify otaku with the fairly mainstream cultural predilection for a teenager sex ideal would mean to ignore a whole wealth of bizarre forms of otaku expression. For example, in spite of You Know It, Lemon Impulse, and Submarine, which are catering to the uniform sex fans under otaku, or Jugs for the fans of big-breasted hermaphrodites, or Samson, a magazine with comics, photos, and poems that is completely devoted to fat old gays. The sex ideal that in this realm corresponds to Lolita would be the aged sumo wrestler. It is hard to imagine what a 15-year-old otaku would find elevating about these pornos. Maybe they represent the pure abstract sex, the simulation of stimulation. But we have to admit we cannot look into the hearts of many a young man. Since we covered sex and rock and roll, you might also want to know about drugs. Answer: none. Otaku are anti-somatic. Information is their only drug, but that they preferably take intravenously. Comics have directly and indirectly influenced large areas of the Japanese culture, from advertising to junk stores that are exclusively devoted to goods with the mark of one single comic figure. If a new trend comes up in one of the media, that it is instantaneously picked up by all others. Pop music idols are shaped by the Let's Be manga figures trend, and in turn they cause new genres in manga and animation and games. And of course, they have their own otaku devotees. On the Kamikato Idol otaku, we're a little underrepresented, but they have their own events and gatherings. Idols are mostly singers, but they are also purees, professional wrestling. Idols like Cutie Suzuki and Dirty Yamato. These living mixtures of battle and Roricon manga are also known as fighting dolls, but for the largest part it refers to young girls with cute faces who are mass-produced into talent singers. The basic knowledge 1990 keeps silent on the idol phenomenon, so we have to refer to the store of wisdom again. Under Aidoru Shitsutimu, idol system, we read, quote, "What we call the idol system of the 80s is the fiction game, where the sender and receiver become one thing, and we have to separate this from the charisma of the earlier age of what was called the star system, Shisutimu. The 80s are represented by the new type of idol, like Kondo Masahiko and Matsuda Seiku. They concretized the recent case of attempted suicide by Nakamori Akina was a break of paradigms in idolianism. Different from Matsuda, she had separated her private life from her activity on stage, and thus maintained a relatively mysterious nature, but she failed because the audience demanded coolly that idols can exist only inside the media. The new type that Matsuda represents is the Boriko. As a well-versed friend told me, the word is derived from bori, to act, to pretend, plus ko, which makes it cute. It would roughly translate to little sweet pretender, or if you interpret it sarcastically, you could also say fucking little liar. Boriko refers to unattractive girl singers who pretend to act especially stupid. They look way too cute with their wide open big eyes and too much lace. They look like manga characters. They seem helpless but in fact are not stupid and rule with an iron fist. Matsuda Seiku was born a Boriiko. She has crossed eyes and protruding teeth. The kids went crazy, and the older women hated her, because her simulated stupidity was an insult to women. The Boriko ideal was, of course, immediately picked up by manga and animation, but this was only an aside for getting a brief glimpse of the dominant culture. Now we look at it from the otaku point of view. Their idol worship consists in collecting artifacts and information not only on one, but on 10 or 100 idols. Mostly they don't pick the big ones like Matsuda, but the B-class or minor idol singers. Of course, they have to keep track of their schedules and have to have all the records, postcards, t-shirts, and other paraphernalia, but they wouldn't be otaku if they were satisfied with the ready-made industrial products. They come in two subcategories, the videotaper and photographer. The video otaku checks on all the TV programs in which idols might appear, records them, and then edits the tapes for his favorites. The camera otaku has chosen a harder task. The idols regularly give promotion or mini-concerts in places like the rooftop of a department store or in the summer, a swimming pool. Since unauthorized photographing is prohibited, the otaku sneak in. Sometimes 3 or 4 of them carry the camera in pants and assemble it inside. Even at the fences, security gets really tough, so the kids run away leaving camera equipment with huge telelenses behind. You can find whole collections after a concert. They only take the film, which is worth enough to buy new cameras. 3 hours later, they sell the photos on the streets of Harajuku. The highest value have shots on which the wind blows up the skirts of the girls and their underwear shows. If you think the hybrid system of Iodorus and Iodorians is pretty hyper-real already, you haven't heard of the virtual idol Hagayui yet, which is not a name, but the word for irritated, impatient, and annoyed, literally a toothache. Virtual she is because she does not exist. She is a phantom consisting of different girls who lend Haga her voice or her body. At concerts her face remains hidden, and her voice is playback. She is an assemblage in a way quite different to the puppets in Bunraku. When Haga recently received a photo book where there were three girls sitting at the autograph hour, people would stand in line before the one whom they thought to be the more real Haga-chan. An exhibition with her original artwork, scheduled for early November, was postponed. But rumor has it that the actual paintings have been done by several renowned artists. The title of the exhibition will be "Does Mysterious Idol Dream of Human-Faced Sheep?" That is, of course, a malicious homage to Philip K. Dickens' Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which served Ridley Scott in the making of Blade Runner. The presumption from the beginning that otaku perform a perpetual play on the border between animate and inanimate seems to harden. Android, a somewhat old-fashioned term, is quite fit for the idol Hagayui as well as for the otaku. They look like humans, but they aren't, and their playing with factoids look like facts but aren't. The idol is pulling her willing followers by the nose. Understandable that they in turn need puppets to pull their strings. Idols like Moritaka, the Chisato, appear reduced in size, but only unessentially more plastic in the form of models. The model otaku, who were also present on the Kamiketo at Makuhari Messi, house a variety of entities, real and non-real in their miniature world, models of idols and comic figures, Godzilla and Garland, automobiles, and militaria. Again, the real otaku distinguishes himself from the mere maniac in that he is not satisfied with the commercial kits. The garage kits they produce in 100 copies are really detailed and elaborate. One of the major magazines for the model otaku is Dopey, Identity Magazine for You, with a circulation of only 40,000. One might get the impression that all otaku are techno freaks, but they do not per se dislike nature. There are even otaku into tropical fish and fossils, as long as they do it in the otaku way. The attitude counts, nothing else. But there can be no doubt that most strands of otaku have a close connection to media and technology. The pure techno-otaku has his major form in radio life. It started out as a magazine for amateur radio operators who came to be called Akushan Banda, Action Bander, which in view of their considerate subversive potential seems to be more appropriate. Radio Life features background and consumer information on electronic devices and components. For example, on radar systems and detectors, the smallest of which is for motorcycle riders worn at the side of the helmet it warns with a buzzer or LED. Or a description for a copy guard cracker that eliminates the effect that digital copy protects certain rental videotapes. Or an article on satellite interception. By the way, the Trotskyist group, Chuchokuha Middle Core Fraction, was just found out to be prepared jamming stations on strategic roofs about the Imperial Palace to disrupt the live broadcasts of the Anthromianet ceremony. So it's not like no one is using this subversive information in practice. Once a year, Radio Life brings out an even more hardcore underground RL. The latest issue features a do-it-yourself kit for an electronic time fuse for any kind of bomb. The following article is on model kits of hand grenades, e.g. the original German World War II model, or you would prefer the classic design of the American MK2 that can also be had as a joystick. The next one is on how to build a stun gun from the condensator of a disposable camera. You can use it to give your next door otaku a 35,000 or 80,000 V-shock. And my last example from this hackerous sink of inequity is the board layout for an adapter that circumvents the DAT copy protection, a nasty little compromise between the music and the hardware industry that allows only one digital copy of every CD, the kind of misuse of technology that just begs to be hacked. In the underground Radio Life, the otaku with subversive ambitions gets the full description how it works and how to crack it. Another clientele of radio life are military and police otaku. They are girls wearing the original uniforms of politeness and boys driving in 99.9% real police cars. The ads show where the sirens, radios, helmets, badges, accessories, down to an official whistle and necktie pin come from, except for the guns, and even those are as close as you can get plastic models. Everything else is authentic, as real as the stuff the genuine military or police is using, simply because the otaku buy it from the same dealer the state does. When the real and imaginary become indistinguishable, the real becomes a fetish. Holy shit. I need to drink more water. Okay. Information crime. I don't think that this is an expression of genuine militarist or terrorist intentions, nor is it the lore of the forbidden per se. Of course, if anyone puts up restrictions to prevent the full use of existing technology, like copy guards or scrambling of signals, it calls for hacking. Otaku also like to use technology for other than the intended purposes, but basically it's an empty, contentless joy of technology and information that drives them. In that sense, there is no significant difference between game otaku and radio hackers, idol maniacs, and carpet magnet forgers. The structure is the same. Essentially, for every otaku is a web of technical details, whether on cameras or police cars, on fictional spaceships or art trucks. Knowledge is important to be able to communicate. Information is the essence of the otaku lifestyle. Through minuscule discrepancies on the informational level, discrepancies, okay. Through minuscule discrepancies on the informational level, wait, does that say though? Okay, I've been reading for too long, I'm messing up. Though minuscule discrepancies on the informational level can have immense consequences for otaku, they seem to be less discriminating with ideologies. War and sex, fantasies of mass murder, and sadomasochistic rape appear regularly in their media, and sometimes one of them finds it hard to discriminate the world where no one dies because everyone is a phantom to begin with, from the other one where little children, when you torture them a bit, really die. Ito Gabin, login, told me the story about this guy who lived completely in a computer world. One day he saw a man standing on a subway platform, and without any reason he pushed them down in front of the train. He didn't think of death, says Ito, it was so easy. In July 1989, Miyazaki Tsutomu was arrested for the suspected abduction and murder of 4 girls aged 4 to 7, and the attempted molestation of another girl. In his room in Tokyo were found piles of manga and a collection of 6,000 videotapes, mostly dubbed from rental stores, including child pornography and horror videos. He was socially isolated, didn't dare approach women, was jobbing as a printing shop assistant, was crazy about video and comics, and drew comics himself. Easy equation to identify him as an otaku. Shortly after his arrest, it was suspected that Miyazaki had restaged some of the horror video scenes, like the one with the guy who cuts up a woman and then fondles the dissected corpse and plays with its internal organs, but the theory could until now not be confirmed. Miyazaki admitted the killings at the beginning of the trial on March 30th, 1990, but denied that his crimes were connected with the videotapes, though he did state that he took videos of 2 of his victims so he could view them later on. He also said he committed the crimes as if in a dream and without intent. The defense counsel contended that the defendant is emotionally immature, and that has difficulty making a distinction between himself and others. Quote, he lacks understanding of life and death, and has a strong desire to return to his mother's womb. Quote, the defense counsel said, The defense argued that the audiovisual culture of videotapes and television, the lack of a sense of reality in the information society, and the isolation of youth are behind the crime of sickness in modern society. The result of a psychiatric test was that Miyazaki has little self-control and lacks emotions, but is capable of being held responsible. The trial is still pending. The tenor of the public discussion on this otaku murder case was that horror videotapes and media culture are somehow responsible. In reaction to Miyazaki, the Tokyo metropolitan government began to consider restricting the access of minors to videos that depict scenes of violence. The video market exercised voluntary restraints. The comments of the cultural critics split roughly in two lines of argument. Either he was a mental case and therefore a sick exception, or there is a Miyazaki in every one of us. This technique is frequently applied when the Japanese culture has to deal with a nail that sticks out. Either you exclude it as something extraordinary, preferably non-Japanese, or we are all Miyazaki. According to Yamazaki, these hasty conclusions are out of place. Quote, "Do we want to understand him, or we know we don't? Everybody asks, why has he done that? But we should rather ask, why don't we do it? Many otaku have the same lifestyle as he, but I don't think they would do such a thing. Miyazaki's biography is not so special. He cannot communicate with women, but that's not special. It was sold that he is living in a fantasy world, but maybe we are all living in a fantasy. I don't think he's crazy because I can understand a part of him, so I'm scared, but I'm not a moralist. Many Japanese think Miyazaki's motivation is connected to our daily life with media and information, and to our human relations, so we are very shocked." End of quote. Towards a postmodern people. The opinions on the current development of the term otaku vary. The Miyazaki case was certainly a blow to the already not very flattering reputation of otaku. We never really trusted these young people. Now you know that what they are capable of." End of quote. But we have to wait for the outcome of the trial to be able to tell whether society will use it to exercise pressure and discriminate against otaku. On the other hand, the term has expanded in scope. Was it at first signifying a quite distinct life feeling it came to include more and more phenomena until it had taken over the function of mania? Wait a minute, let me read that again. On the other hand, the term has expanded in scope. Was it at first signifying a quite distinct life feeling it came to include more and more phenomena until it had taken over the function of mania? So today one can interchangeably talk about motorcycles, stereo, golf, or music, maniacs, or otaku. In the earlier times, maniaku referred to people who are open for communication and have other interests besides their special craze. Both points did not apply to otaku. An otaku was never used for oneself, always for others. The inflationary use of terms, we can perceive how layers of them pile up on top of each other. Through the inflationary use of terms, we can perceive how layers of them pile on top of each other. It seems to be true of all discourses for understanding self and other. They get bloated till everybody has room under them. We are all otaku. We are all Miyazaki. In the end, they lose their power of distinction and get replaced by new catchwords. Another trend is marked by the appearance of the adjective form otaki. Yamazaki supposes an etymological relation with teki, which is an earlier formation contracted from Technology-Kids. The basic knowledge tells us, quote, "After Miyazaki spoiled otaku, otaki was invented to refer to the original meaning, and to the change that had taken place. The otaku moved to a new level where people wear expressive, elegant yuppie clothes. The otaki people try to improve their image from something dark to something bright." End of quote. The Basic is the only source that perceives a yuppeification of otaku. but that it shifted towards a somewhat more positive meaning even in spite of Miyazaki is widely accepted. Though again, the reasons given vary. Some say society has come to realize that it needs otaku, their fantasies and their detailed technical knowledge make them very attractive employees, for example, in software. Otaku are fit well for Japanese capitalism, as has before an underground might prove to be the testing ground from which consumer mainstream supplies itself with fresh ideas. The former reality hackers graduate from the otaku life, go professional, and might eventually even get married. Again, others attempt to give an alternative meaning to otaku. They use the term strategically to depict an ambiguous possibility of a lifestyle in postmodern society, a way of positively living with media and without meaning. A way of positively living with media and without meaning. Says Suzuki, quote, "Otaku is a way of involvement, an underground way of changing the ideas about the world. Otaku are not satisfied with consuming. They want to change things and programs. They are so much involved. The the idol industry wants consumers. Otaku overfulfill their wish. They don't stand for a classic confrontation, but they do have the capability of an alternative view." End of quote. Yamazaki is more ambivalent about them. In his opinion, they are under as well as overestimated. In a sense, they are typical Japanese. Quote, "They are no dropouts, but part-time outsiders. I wonder whether otaku will create a new culture. It's a kind of experiment, but I think otaku are the only way. Whether they have a subversive potential? I hope so. I hope they will become a real Shenzhen Ryui, a new kind of Japanese, a postmodern people." End of quote. In the end, we raise the question whether the possibility exists for a mode of being outside oneself, without being out of one's mind, of being dispersed in cyberspace and still finding life worth living, and whether there might even be a subversive element in postmodern media culture. But unfortunately, the object of our inquiry does not answer. The center of communication does not communicate itself. Is it the blind spot without which we cannot see? Asked for a definition, a self-proclaimed otaku answered, quote, "The question, who is otaki? Is like the Zen koan? What is Satori? It cannot be answered because Satori is inherently that which cannot be communicated." End of quote. And when the sentence still reverberates in the silence that usually follows the mentioning of the unnameable, the author quietly sneaks out of this article.